Okay, so some great info in that little video, a nice explanation of how it works. Let's take a crack at it. Okay, so I'm going to switch our keys here. I'm going to put us in C minor, and let's look at an example that has this. Actually, I'm just going to do this in whole notes. So we're going to have a D in the bass, and then this kind of figured bass is kind of tricky to do in MuseScore. Not to make it, just to do the symbols. Okay. Okay. So I have a natural and a 6 on a D. Now here's the biggest mistake that people make with figured bass. They assume that the bass note is the root of the chord, and we want you to build a 6, an inversion of a 6, so a first inversion chord on D. No, that's not correct. What we actually have here is D is the bass note in this case, not the root of the chord. So you have to figure out what the root of the chord is based on this information, which is enough. Which is enough information to figure it out. So let's do this in Roman numerals first. Okay, so if we have a first inversion chord, let's just ignore this natural for a minute. Let's pretend that's not there. So if we have a first inversion chord, so that means I'm going to have a sixth above it, and then there's going to be a third in there. Because as the guy we just listened to likes to say, we're lazy musicians. I don't know if I like that. I wouldn't consider myself lazy. But that there's that missing 3 in there. So 6-3 is really what we're looking at here. Okay, so now this is our actual chord. So what is the root of this chord? It's actually a G chord, because G, B, D. If I moved this up an octave, we'd have a root position triad. Okay, so when it says D6, it means a root position chord, or sorry, it means D is the bass note of a first inversion chord, but it's not a D chord. In fact, when you look at it, if it says D and then there's a 6 underneath it, the one thing that you know for sure is that it is not a D chord. That's definitely what it's not, if there's a number underneath it. Okay, now let's throw this natural back into the mix here. That means that the sixth, which the sixth is a 6 above the bass note, so that's going to be this note, it wants to be natural. So we're going to raise that to a natural. So now we have D, G, B natural. Okay? So in Roman numerals, what is that? Typically we write Roman numerals underneath figure bass when we write them. So we're in the key of C minor, a D, G, B natural. So that's a G major in the key of C. That's going to be a what? I lost my text. That is going to be a major 5 chord, right? Because that sixth is raising our leading tone, B in the key of C, to make that the major 5 chord, just like what we saw in the video. Because normally, if we didn't raise that, we would have a minor 5 chord in the key of C minor. But we've raised that to give us a major 5 chord. Okay, let's try another one. Let's do... Let's do a G with a floating natural underneath it and nothing else. Okay, we're still in C minor. Okay, and we've got this kind of floating natural underneath. Now remember what we learned from that video. If there's a floating accidental like this, not attached to any number, that means it's attached to the third. Not the third of the chord, third above the bass. So we're going to put a third above the bass, and that's going to be natural. Okay, and then we're going to fill out the chord. And we have G, B, D, another 5 chord, major 5 chord, right? So the thing to remember is that it doesn't tell you the root of the chord is not what you're getting in the bass note. The bass note is not telling you the root of the chord. The bass note is literally the bass note. You will see bass notes written out like a good old normal bass line. You know, it's not just whole notes. And then your job will be to put this all together. In fact, let me pull up a piece of sheet music written with figured bass. Okay, so here's kind of a random image I found online of using figured bass. So what we have here is a normal old bass line. You know, this is like a melodic bass line. It's to a nice piece of music, I'm sure. What we have here is we can look at it quickly and kind of figure out based on the key signature. Okay, we're in the key of probably A major. Also possible would be F sharp minor. So here we have an E and no numbers underneath it. So that's going to be a root position chord. And then here in between, we're still using that E, but now the root position is going to switch to a 6/4 with E in the bass, which is going to be a totally different chord. And then E 5/3, so back to a root position chord. We put that 5/3 there because we came from a 6/4 and we want to show that it's going back to a 5/3. I think I talked about that when we were talking about inversions shortly ago. Okay, now we have a B. That's going to be the bass note of a first inversion chord, then a B in root position, then a C in root position, then an F in root position because there's nothing here, then a G in first inversion, a B in first inversion, an E in root position, an A in first inversion, an F in root position, a B in second inversion, then a B in root position, and then an E in root position. So that's kind of a more practical thing of how this looks, but it can get a lot more complicated than this. You can see a piece of music that's just nothing but numbers. And people in the Baroque were really good at reading this stuff. They could just sit down with this and just improvise all of the other notes that needed to happen. It's kind of mind-blowing, actually. Okay, so let's go back to our example here, and let's do a full realization of these two chords in the next video.